Hi everyone, welcome to Introduction to Database Access course. This course is fully online and I'm going to be giving you some introductory information to make sure that you are aware of how the layout of the course is set up and how to best be successful in the course. I do want to make you aware that if you are on campus at all during the first week of classes, there's a lot of fun activities going on. There's prizes, free food. So take advantage of that. There's a link for that in D2L that you will see. And then I want to make sure that everybody please read the syllabus so that you know what the required book is, and also that you have to have Microsoft Access 2016 loaded on your computer in order to do the work. You will begin doing assignments off of the book starting next week, next Monday. So it's very important that you have both the book and the software before then. In D2L, there are links to the book that you can get. You can get a used copy or you can get an e-copy. You can rent it. There's several options there. The software is given free by Microsoft. You do have to use your student email that Brussels Sport College gives you, the one that ends in .edu, in order to be able to download that software for free. So it's very important that you take care of all of this really early on during the week so that come next week when you have to start the actual material and work in the book, you have everything ready. Please contact me if you have any trouble doing that. To give you a quick view of that, let me go on to D2L. Let's see, you can see that under content, you have the links for the syllabus, for the schedule, which shows you when the test will be, the welcome week flyer that I just showed you, and then there's a link for the book and the software, and also for extra credit that I'm offering in all my classes. It's not related to Access. It's called the Gator program, where you read a book and discuss it, meet 3 times in the semester, and I offer 3 points added to your final grade if you choose to do that. It's totally up to you. Some general course information then, the layout and the schedule of the course. Every week you will be working through a module in the book, following the instructions in the book, so you will be generating a database. As you build each database, make sure you save it in a place where you will find it, because each module builds on the previous one. So when you finish the work for week 1, whatever you submit to me, you need to keep it, because you will need to open that up to get started whenever you do Module 2. The exams have to be taken at the college. They must be proctored at Brussels Sport College. And so it's important that you look at the schedule and you schedule yourself early, the week before the exam, so that you get a 2-hour block, make sure that they're not full. And there will be 3 major exams, 1 every 3 modules. And 1 final exam. Notice that if you get an A or an average of an A on the 3 semester exams, then you will be exempt from taking the final exam. So yay, work really hard throughout the semester. Make sure you're getting the information, you're understanding, so that you can ace those 3 tests, and then you will be exempt from the final. How to succeed in this class. This course is not an easy class. Microsoft Access is probably one of the harder software out there. It is not like Microsoft Word, where you can kind of figure things out on your own. It's not even like Excel, where you can somehow figure things out on your own. Microsoft Access can be pretty complex. The whole concept behind a relational database is complicated, especially in an online class. So here are some of the things that I think are going to be very important for you to succeed in the course. Number 1, do not procrastinate. Just because we are not meeting face-to-face, do not wait until the last minute to try to get everything in just to submit for the sake of submitting. Because if you are not learning as you are doing your work, you will not pass the exams. I can tell you that from experience. As in any online class, it's very important that you set aside time, just as if you were coming to class. So for some people, it's actually good to just pretend and say, okay, every week on Tuesday evenings from 7:30 to 9:30, and on Thursday evenings or afternoons, I have a 2-hour block of time that I'm going to dedicate to my Access class. You can expect to spend anywhere between 3 to 4, maybe 5 hours for everybody, for some people, to fully understand, because you will have to read the whole chapter, you will have to work through the module, then you'll have a lab assignment, there's a quiz, and questions to be answered for every single module for every week. I want to emphasize point number 3 that you're seeing on the screen. This is not a weekend class. And what I mean by that is that although all assignments are due on Sunday evenings at 11:30 p.m., if you wait until the weekend to get started, I can pretty much guarantee that you will not be successful in the course. From past experience, people that try to just work on the assignments on Saturday and Sunday, they don't get it, they don't understand, they're rushing, and they do not pass the course. I've even had people that try to do it all on Sunday. It's not going to work. It is very important that early in the week you begin reading the material, understanding it, working it through. Allow yourself several days to be able to complete the work and submit it by Sunday. It's important also that you read with understanding as you're working through the modules. Don't just read and click, click, click just to get the database done and submitted, because if you're not understanding why you're clicking or why you are choosing certain things, then you are not grasping the concepts, and come test time, you will not do well. The exams are all hands-on. They are not true, false, multiple choice. They will require you to create and work on databases pretty much like you do throughout the weeks. So that's why it's very important that you understand what you are doing as you are doing it. Every week when I give you assignments, I also, besides directing you to the book, I also provide several online resources. Sometimes these are videos, sometimes it's just additional reading. I try to make sure that if they're videos that they're short, maybe 3 to 4 minutes each, take advantage of that, because a lot of times those videos will show you the information in a way that's different than what the book is showing you, and it will really help to clarify the concept that you are needing to learn. So take advantage of that. And then last but not least, please communicate with me. I think most people that know me find that I'm easy to communicate with. If you just tell me what's going on, just because this is an online class, it does not mean that I am not available to see you. If you need to come and see me and clarify some things that you're not getting, you can always make an appointment to see me. So please communicate. Don't wait until the last minute, or don't wait until the last week of class and then tell me, okay, what do I need to do to pass? Because by then it will be too late. Okay, so having laid out all the kind of ground rules and information on helping you succeed, I do want to give you a little bit of information about Access, why you need Microsoft Access. First of all, it is a very desirable employment skill. And those of you that have had Excel may wonder, well, why do I need Access? Because Access is a database. It's designed to store data, to help you get information out of a database. And some of you might be thinking, well, Excel does that. Excel allows me to sort the data, store the data, filter the data. So why do I need to learn Access? Well, Access is pretty much a step beyond Excel, because Excel cannot handle everything that Access can. So big corporations, you might think of banks, grocery stores, they use databases. They don't use spreadsheets to store their data. Here's a sample Excel, what might be an Excel database for you, those of you that have had Excel. You can see some information here that relates to students. So you have the student names, their email, their phone number, who their counselor is, the email for their counselor, the office for their counselor, and the phone number for their counselor. This information could be stored in an Excel spreadsheet. But if you were to store this information in Access, then there's several things that have to happen so that Access functions the way that it's supposed to. Access, as you will learn next week, is what's called a relational database. And in a relational database, data is stored in tables, and tables look pretty much like an Excel spreadsheet. Rows are records and columns are fields. So if I go back to what you saw previously, the rows are considered a record. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 records. And then the fields are your columns. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fields in this particular example. Some of the rules are that names should be split into different columns for first name and last name. So you can see in the previous example that column number 1 should be really split into 2, first name and last name. Also, each record, remember a row is a record, should have a unique identifier which is called a primary key. So in the previous example, there is no identifier. You might think of an identifier as like a social security number or a student ID, which all of you have here at Russell Sport College. Something that uniquely identifies each record. The last name is not a good primary key because you could have many people with the same last name, right? And so it has to be something that is always going to uniquely identify each record. The next rule says that each table should contain data for one type of entity. An entity could be considered people, places, things, or events. And then each field should be a fact of the record's primary key. If it's not, then it belongs in another table. So these last two tend to get a little bit confusing. So let me go and try to explain and break these down. Here is the same example as before, the Excel looking database or table. Data is stored in tables. Rows are records, columns are fields. Names should be split into different columns, one for first name and one for last name. So far this is okay except for the fact that the names should be split into 2 different columns. Each record should have a unique identifier. So you can see that we would need something like a student ID or social security number to identify each student. And then it says each table should contain data for one type of entity, which is people, place, things, or event. If you're looking at this data, think about it, you really see 2 different entities because you see information for students, but then you also see information for counselors. And so in Access, you cannot have all of that information in the same table, in the same place. Look at the last rule. Each field should be a fact of the record's primary key. If it's not, then it belongs in another table. So when you look at this data, each field, remember each field was a column, should be a fact of the record's primary key. So assume that you have a student ID. Is the student's name a fact of the student ID? Yes. Is the student's email a fact of the student ID? Yes. Is the student's phone number a fact of the student ID? Yes, because it identifies that student. Is the counselor a fact of the student ID? Yes, because it identifies the counselor that has been assigned to that student. However, is the counselor's email a fact of the student ID? The answer to that is no, because that's the email of the counselor, not the email of the student. The same thing with the office number and the phone number. Those pieces of information belong to the counselor, not to the student. And so that's where that last rule comes in. Each field should be a fact of the record's primary key. If it is not, then it belongs in another table. So taking this example into Access, the way that this data would be stored in Access would be as follows. Here are the rules again. Data is stored in tables. So now in Access we would have 2 tables. You still have rows as records, columns as fields. Names are split into 2 columns. So you can see that in the student table we now have a field for last name, 1 field for first name. Each record should have a unique identifier called a primary key. So in the student table, the primary key is the student ID. In the counselor table, the counselor ID is the primary key. Each table should contain data for one type of entity, people, places, things, or events. So you can see that the student table contains information only for the student or about the student. The counselor table contains information only about the counselor. And each field should be a fact of the record's primary key. So now, in the student table, everything in that table is related to the student. And in the counselor table, everything in that table is related to the counselor. So if you're looking at the student table and you say, well, I need to know the name of the counselor for Lisa Brisbane, what you're doing, if you visually look at this, you are looking at Lisa's record and you see that her counselor is counselor number 2, C002, which happens to be Valdez. And so the tables are related through the counselor ID. That's why it's called a relational database. And that's how the information is gathered in Access. Okay, so this was just a very, very general understanding, or hoping that you use this information to understand where we're going to be going this semester with the data. As you begin your journey, you're going to be creating these databases, and I do want to show you an existing database to kind of go over some of the basics again. So here I have a database that has been saved in Microsoft Access. Each database stores what are called objects, tables, which is what we were talking about a few minutes ago. This is where the data is actually stored. So this particular database has a client table. You see how a table looks, just like an Excel spreadsheet, and a bookkeeper table. So if you look at the client table, you see that each client at the very end has been assigned a bookkeeper. So if I need to know who the bookkeeper is, I look at the bookkeeper number and then I look them up in the bookkeeper table. That's where the data is stored. In addition to tables, each database can also have queries. Queries are questions that you ask of your data. So for example, when I look at the client data, if I want to see a list of the clients that owe over $300, I know that I only have a few clients here, but imagine me having 20,000 clients. I certainly don't want to visually do that. So a query allows you to ask information of that data, and when you run the query, you can see that these are the 3 clients that owe over $300. A form is another kind of object in Access, and a form lets you look at the data, but instead of looking like a spreadsheet, it actually shows you one record at a time. So you can see that if I show you the client data again, see how the first client is Afton Mills and then Atlas Supplier? Well, on that form, the first record is all on one screen for Afton Mills, and then on the next screen is Atlas Supplier, and so on and so forth. And then reports are also objects, and reports are intended for printed output, so they let you see the data in a much prettier format if you wanted to print or send it out to someone. And they allow you to select all the data that you're interested in. So here's just a basic client report that shows not everything about every client, but it shows their client number, their name, how much they have paid, and how much they still owe. So all these objects, the tables, the queries, the forms, and the reports are all stored in one database. So one database file contains many objects. So when you first start out and you create your database, you're creating pretty much like a container that's going to be storing your data, your queries, your forms, and your reports. Okay. I don't want to scare you. I don't want this to seem extremely complicated, but I think as you move on through the semester, everything will start to make sense. I just wanted to take a few minutes to, first of all, give you the rules for succeeding, and then just give you an overall of an Access database. So after this video, please go ahead and take that short little quiz that's listed under contents for week 1, and make sure that you read the syllabus, the schedule, that you have your book and your software, and you're ready to go next week to actually start working. Please contact me if you have any questions, and I look forward to working with you. Best of luck.